bet you did not know this. Fans have more friends. Who doesn't want more friends? So then you can just go, well, I got to become a fan of something. That's just how that works. And Ben Valenta, his new book, that's what it's all about. Let's call it Fans Have More Friends. And Ben, you're what, SVP of Strategy and Analytics for Fox Sports, and you've been a consultant for everything from Nike to the NFL to the New York Knicks. I mean, how do you get that gig? Jesus, that's a sweet gig.
It has been a sweet gig. I've been very lucky.
Yeah, like that's not something you go to college for, is it?
Sadly, it's not. I wish I could say that I had this premeditated plan to get where I got to, but here I am.
Yeah. So when you say fans have more friends, do you mean just sports fans?
Well, I mean just sports fans, and that's what the book is about. It's about sports fandom. I think my take on this is fandom of all stripes can create connection, right? You and I can be friends and can connect over different things, and that those shared interests can galvanize our relationship. But the difference between sports and other things is sports exist at such a scale that I can drop down into a bar anywhere in the country today, and the chances of me being able to gin up a conversation with an NFL fan are pretty high. The chances of me meeting somebody who's into yoga or CrossFit or Game of Thrones are relatively low, and that's the magic of sports.
Yeah, and there's a camaraderie, and that's why anytime I see these viral videos of the fights at football stadiums or baseball stadium, whatever stadium, and it's people wearing the same jersey, because as human beings, we have this, gang tribal mentality where we, stick with people that have similar interest, and we fight to the death because it's justified that we believe in the same things. So when I see these viral videos of, let's just say, two Detroit Lion fans fighting each other, I'm going, what are you doing? You guys are on the same side. This makes no sense whatsoever. You're not friends and you're fans. That doesn't make any sense.
Well, what I would argue for is that, sports is so big, as I was just talking about, that it intersects with all cuts of society, right? It intersects with our society as a whole. And therefore, we see some of the problems we have in our society. Some of those people, they crop up in sports. That's not sports' fault. Those two Lions fans aren't fighting about the Lions, right? They're fighting because if they weren't at the stadium, they'd be fighting in the bar, right? They're just a couple of old drunks who fight. And we see those people in the stands, and we sort of say, well, that's what fans are all about. But when we do that, we miss the magic that's happening right next to them. We miss the father-daughter who are creating memories. We miss the group of buddies who have come together for a reunion. We miss all of that connection that's really powerful. And that's what we want to do with this book, is change how people think about fandom. Get away from this idea that it's that drunk guy, picking a fight in the stands, and think about it as, oh, this is the reason that I connect with my own family. This is the reason that I get together with my own friends, and this actually improves the quality of my life.
It's really interesting that we're having you on the show. I was having this conversation with my wife the other day, and I said out loud, I'm 47 and I'm a sports fan, and I've played college football and, played every sport, and, I'm still fairly athletic and whatnot, big tennis guy. But I couldn't honestly say that I'm a diehard fan of anything. And that upsets me. That makes me very sad. And I forget what we were talking about. And my wife said, well, you're a fan of that. You would do something that was like really crazy. And I go, no, I wouldn't. There's nothing out there that I can think of, outside of family and all that stuff. But there's nothing out. There's no sports teams. There's nothing out there that I am that passionate about that I would go the lengths of getting buried in the casket or never moving from that city or so on and so forth. That makes me sad, because those people are the people you're talking about, right, Ben? Those are the people that are the happiest and have more friends.
Well, those are the people that I'm talking about, but it's not about, exhibiting the sort of fanatical behaviors necessarily. It's really about just leaning into this shared passion, right? So even if you're a more casual observer of this, you can realize these benefits of fandom just by leaning in and by saying yes to the fantasy league, by sending that text message to your friend of the team who is in the news, right? Who you haven't talked to for years. The team gives you a reason, an opportunity to connect. Take advantage of that. That's going to improve your life. And I think that's really what we want people to recognize. Yes, those people that are fanatical, they enjoy these benefits, but you can also enjoy these benefits too.
Wow, that's powerful. Nate, do you have a question for Ben? This is fascinating stuff. I love it.
Yeah, I've noticed that from your website that you have like consulted a lot of large companies. Do you seek them out, or do they seek you out, or how do you get into consulting those types of companies?
Well, those are in my kind of my old life as a consultant. Those are relationships that you have, and sometimes they seek you out, sometimes you seek them out. But really over time, through doing good work and delivering on promises, you develop the relationships and a reputation, and then that's how you find the work.
Out of all these big companies that you've consulted, and we'll get back to the book. I know I feel like you don't want to talk about your past life all that much, but it is very interesting for the rest of us. But with all these big companies that you consulted, like I said, everything from Nike to the NFL to Anheuser-Busch, InBev, YouTube, ESPN, you name it, who gave you the coolest free stuff?
Oh, Nike for sure.
I'm sure, yeah.
Going to the Nike employee store in Oregon is it's if you're into that sort of thing, it's like walking into Shangri-La.
Do they still send you the monthly package that they'll do with their athletes?
Sadly, I never got on that distribution.
I have a friend that is a professional tennis player. He's a wheelchair player. Actually, the most winningest tennis player ever. Actually, anyway, he's sponsored by Nike, and he splits time between San Diego and here in Atlanta. And he just has too much stuff, so he'll bring it down here with him. And we have a mutual friend, and I'll dig through the box. like those shorts right there is $75. I know, because that's why I didn't buy them.
That's a good friend to have.
That's a great friend to have. Some of the bullet points that about your book, and you did this. Let's give David credit because that's your partner, right? David, how do you say his last name?
Sikoriak.
Sikori.
He's my partner and co-author.
Yeah. And so you guys got together with this great concept, especially, for those of us that enjoy sports. But engaged sports fans are more satisfied with their jobs, careers, and relationships. And that's one of the things that the highlights from the book. I mean, now we're starting to get into the therapy world, in that kind of conversation. We're just not talking about being a fan of sports. Now we're talking about using sports as therapy to help out with things like jobs, careers, and relationships, correct?
That's absolutely right. I mean, that's where this got interesting for us. That's where it went from an interesting insight that we could use professionally to a book, to sort of an advocacy mission. We all of a sudden proved out that fandom is about social connection, and that social connection results in more friendships. And then we got into, well, what's the benefit of those friendships? And that's where this gets really interesting. So it's not just that fans have more friends. It's that because of those friends, fans are happier, more optimistic, more confident, more satisfied with their life, more grateful. They're more likely to be registered to vote. They're more likely to give to charity. This whole cascade of things that we would say objectively are good for us are correlated with fandom, because fandom creates this environment where we can connect with other people.
So I've always been told in the radio business, for any show that I've had that I'm pitching to someone else, and I think you'll probably be able to relate to this doing what you did in your past life and even still today, is that you should be able to describe your brand and or your product in 5 words or less. So with that theory of being able to do that, if you were to describe to somebody why fans have more friends in 5 words or less, now that you've brought this therapy, part of into the conversation, how would you describe it?
I'm trying to count the words in my head. You know, just I'll answer the question, but that's actually why we named the book what we did. We wanted it to be very telegraphic, brick to forehead clear. Fans have more friends. Like, that's the actual takeaway. So in some ways, it's kind of a cheat answer, but that's really my response to this question. It's fans have more friends, right? You want more friends. Like, friends are good. You want to be more fulfilled. That's good. All this connection, these deepening of ties to our families, to our friends, to strangers on the street and our communities, that comes from fandom. And so I guess maybe the response is fans have more friends.
Yeah, but that's kind of the generic answer, right? Because what's the title of the book? But when you break it down, there has to be one variable, one characteristic about a fan of anything. And that's the reason why they would have more friends. Would it be because fans understand camaraderie, fans understand You know, I don't know. Camaraderie is just what comes to mind. I guess that word.
No, this is a really good question, and there's a few reasons why sports fans enjoy this sort of benefit, right? So the first is scale. So if you drop me into a bar in Atlanta, the chances of me being able to gin up a conversation with a perfect stranger in a bar is quite high if I can talk about the Falcons or the Hawks, right? Or if I can just talk about the NFL in general, maybe SEC football. All
Yeah.
of those things are going to be entry points into a conversation with a stranger, right? The
Yeah.
other thing I would point out is versatility. So I'm from Colorado. You know, I don't live in Colorado anymore, but I'm still a big Denver Bronco fan. And the Denver Broncos, you know, like it or not, are the foundation of my relationship with my father and my three brothers. It's the thing that we talk about, right? It's the reason we come together every Sunday. And we're not together in the same room, but we're on the phone, we're FaceTiming, we're, you know, texting each other. All of those things are creating that connection, instilling and really fortifying those relationships. And at the same time, I can talk to those strangers in the bar in Atlanta about SEC football, and sports can do all of that stuff, right? And then I think the last thing I would say is sports are the one remaining safe place, right? Like if you want to make small talk with a stranger, you can talk about the weather, and then you can talk about sports. And after that, everything else becomes fraught. And sports, though, we can go in and we can sort of have a hot take. You can bust my chops about, you know, whatever rival team I might support, and it doesn't matter. It's all in good fun.
Well, I don't know if I agree with you on that one.
All right.
Maybe it's just the place where I live, but you know, I was listening to a conversation the other day. I have a tendency to open my mouth when I should not. I have this mantra in life where I feel like people need to be held accountable if they're incompetent, if they're wrong, you know, and I'm the guy to do it. And of course, Nate jumps all over me and he's like, dude, you're not always right. So what are you doing? But I heard a conversation the other day and they were talking about the Falcons. They were all over the place. Oh, I was at a poker table and this kid, it was the Falcons Carolina game that was on. It was Thursday night football. And this kid says, he goes, you know, they're going to have a problem running the ball. Carolina's got top 3 run defense. Well, I know they do not have the top 3 run. It bothered me, right? He was wrong. And then the next guy said something about Marcus Mariota and how well he does certain. I'm like, I know that's not true. I'm like, for a fact, I know these things aren't true. Do I say something? And that's where I'm going to disagree with you because, you know, sports has kind of gotten like politics and religion, is that when you bring it up, somebody's going to disagree and it gets heated. It just doesn't roll off somebody's. I mean, people stick to their guns about what they believe in sports, especially if you're bashing their team, especially if you're bashing a team like the Denver Broncos and the relationship you have with that team because of the relationship you have with your father and your brothers.
That's true. And I take your point, and it's you know, that does happen. I would say by and large, though, that if you correct those people, you know, you can have that debate about sports. And the guy's wrong about the run defenses. He might have a take about Marcus Mariota, and he feels very strongly about that. You can have the opposite take, but now you're talking, you're conversing. Now,
Right.
generally, like the heat might get turned up, and you might get passionate about this because they're things that we care about. But it doesn't cause rancor. You know, you're not oftentimes getting in a fight with somebody about that sort of thing. When we use the word hate to describe a rival, we don't necessarily mean hate in the same way that if you described a political rival, you mean hate, right? And I think that that's kind of the point here. It's that all of these different things, whether they're disagreements or agreements, whether you're celebrating a win or commiserating a loss, they're all opportunities to connect.
Well, I grew up, you know, in Maryland as a Washington Redskins fan, and I can honestly tell you I hate the Dallas Cowboys. Without a doubt. I absolutely despise and hate the Dallas Cowboys, but I understand what you're saying. You know, I did sports talk radio for a year and it was the worst year of my life. I didn't realize that sports at some point became not fun, and everybody that I was surrounded by, that's all they did. They knew nothing about the outside world. All they knew was sports. And I kind of understood it because there's so much that you have to know and you don't have time to, you know, worry about this or worry about that or worry about that. And that's just not my cup of tea. But these people, that's all they did was argue. I mean, on and off the air, but especially off the air, there's this little pit area. And they would pick fights with people. You know, it's like, I heard you said, you know, like, what are you doing right now? I This is crazy. You know,
Right, right.
so the sportsy world is a little weird. Let me ask you this, Ben. Who do you think has the most diehard fan base? Is it like sports? Is it music? Is it television shows, especially popular ones like Yellowstone, let's say, for example, or Walking Dead? Movies, dog owners, those types of people. Who has the most popular fan base or the strongest, most diehard fan base?
Oh, it's definitely sports. Like if we think about it as a category, right? Now you might be able to say that, well, Taylor Swift fans are the most diehard people out there, but I would argue that the reason that sports are so powerful and the reason that they sustain such passion is because there's a reliable, recurring rhythm to sports, and that means that every Sunday creates an opportunity for me to connect with my family about the Broncos, and then once the season's over, then all of a sudden it rolls into, well, now we're going to focus on the Nuggets and the Avs, right? And now I'm going to think about March Madness and the Masters and all those things. And we flow through the calendar, connecting constantly through sports. Now, Yellowstone's a great show. I love Yellowstone, right? But it's going to be over after a couple seasons. And then there's going to be a new thing, right? And the reality is not that many people watch Yellowstone, right? Not nearly as many people as engage with the NFL. And it's the most popular in years, right? I saw some numbers recently came out. It was something like 12 million people tuned into the 2 hour premiere, right? That's a massive success in TV. Well, that's half the audience that tuned in to watch the Packers play the Cowboys last weekend.
Really?
That's right.
Wow. And that turned out to be a pretty damn good game. Nobody saw that coming.
Nobody did.
So like when you look at certain football teams, I get not jealous, but envious of the fan base for teams. And I guess I would be if I were a diehard Washington or Commanders fan. But like I look at the Jets, you know, where in the Browns, where they've got all this heritage, they've got this legacy, and they've just been beat up constantly. And I see, you know, their number one fan, was it Fireman Ed or something? Fireman Ed. Yeah. And I'm like, that's awesome. Like to be that guy. You know, there was a buddy of mine when I lived in Orlando that he was the big Orlando Magic fan. He was there from day one. They called him the Orlando Magic fat guy. And he's actually a defense attorney, and his name's Dennis Salvaggio. He looks like the Danny DeVito penguin from Batman, and he wobbles. But he would wear this like really bright jacket, and he would run around and get the crowd worked up. And he was the Orlando Magic fat guy. That's what his name still is to this day after like 30 some years. It's crazy. Those are the fans that I'm so envious of. It's like it's what they live for, right? And those people, you want to be friends with those people. That's why this book makes sense. Fans have more friends.
Well, that's right. And when that guy walks into the Magic Arena, or Fireman Ed walks into wherever the Jets play, he's walking into a whole web of connections, right? He knows the people in his section. He knows the ushers, right? He knows the concession people, the ticket takers, etc. And that creates connection in his life. Like there are just more people he's connected to, right? Mm-hmm. I think that's the important. Like you bring up the tortured fan base, and we've actually split all of our data by fans of perennial winners and perennial losers, and we see actually no difference between these people. And that's because it's not about the team on the field. You know, we spent some time. I used to work for the New York Knicks, and we were asking questions of season ticket holders. Why are you a season ticket holder, right? And we met this guy named Greg. And Greg had been a season ticket holder for about 30 years. Now, the first 8 or 9 years of those 30 years were great. It was the 90s Knicks. They were winners. They were in the Eastern Conference Finals. They had Patrick Ewing and John Starks and a really exciting team, right? But then they hit the doldrums, and they've been bad for 20 years. So why is this guy, who's not highfalutin, he's not an investment banker, he manages a grocery store in Yonkers, why is he still dedicating so much of his disposable income, his time, to the New York Knicks? And we spent time with him. I was like, Greg, this is kind of crazy. This seems irrational. Why are you doing this? And the more time we spent with him, the more we realized, oh, it's because it's not about the team. It's not about the court on the on-court product. It's about the people he shares this with. He goes to the 30-plus games a year, and he takes one of his 3 sons, right, to every game. And all of a sudden, his commute from Yonkers to the Garden, it becomes, a feature, not a bug, because he's driving in with his son. And all of a sudden, it reframes how we think about this sort of behavior. And the real reason that he's a season ticket holder, the real reason he's a Knicks fan, is because all of these relationships in his life are predicated upon the New York Knicks.
Right. I I heard an analogy somebody made not that long ago that said that rock stars are the modern day Greek gods, and I thought that was very interesting. I knew what they meant by it. I mean, I didn't take it out of context. I knew exactly what they meant by it as far as you're a fan, you admire, you just they do something. I mean, everybody's got an artist or a musician or a band that means something. Music is the soundtrack of our lives. But the same goes in sports, where I can't stop watching. I wish the internet had more of this. I always repost it. Is videos like Amon St. Brown, the wide receiver for the Detroit Lions, just the other week. There's this kid that just got diagnosed with cancer. He's in a wheelchair, and that's his favorite player. And he makes time to go over and talk to him, not like he's a sick kid or God forbid something's about to happen to him, but just like, hey man, I appreciate you being a fan of mine. I appreciate you being a fan of the NFL. He signed something, took a picture. Then he goes on Twitter and says, hey, I'm looking for this young man. I want to give him a signed jersey. Like, he goes over and beyond. And that's why you want to be fans of like sports in the NFL and these players, the players that do that. Now, of course, you're going to have the bad apples, but that story that I just told, if you're not familiar with it, I mean, if that doesn't make you, that's what the world should be, like more of that. And that's why you want to be a fan of these things, right, Ben?
Well, the way I would think about it is that, Monte Brown's a great player on the field. Those sorts of stories are fantastic. As you point out, there's also bad apples out there. The players are going to let us down sometimes, and they're gonna sort of lift us up at times. And the thing I would say is we want to focus more attention on when they lift us up, and we want to shine a spotlight on that. If it bleeds, it leads. So we tend to focus on the negative stories, but we should be focusing on the positive stories as well. But I think what we should recognize is that story gives us a way to connect with other people. We can use that story. Hey, did you see this thing? Oh. Right? Did you know that this guy does this thing? And just that text message, right, to our friend, send that article to somebody. It creates an opportunity to connect. It's an on-ramp to conversation. And that's where we can unlock the power of our fandom. And what gets us to be bigger fans is now we're not talking about Amon St. Brown or the Detroit Lions or the NFL, but it's like, hey, how's the kid doing? How's the job? How's life? It's weird if I just sent you a text message out of the blue, like, hey, how you doing? How are the kids? Right? Like, that would kind of come across maybe a little abrasive, especially if we hadn't talked for a while. Right. If I start with, hey, did you see this story about Amon St. Brown? What a great story. And it's like, oh, yeah, that's a heartwarming story. And then you're into a conversation. And that conversation is actually the important part. That's the real reason that fans enjoy these benefits, is because they're having more of those conversations.
That's fantastic. Before we let you go, Ben, Nate, any more questions?
Yeah, what's your favorite moment as a fan, and also who's your sports team?
So I'm from Colorado. You can't be in Colorado and not be a Denver Bronco fan. So even though I'm also a fan of some of the other teams from the area, especially the Nuggets, the Broncos are really about it. And it really comes down to when they won their first Super Bowl, Elway. I was with my family. They were playing the Green Bay Packers. There was a bunch of people, and I think like the house levitated when they won. And I'll never forget that moment.
And also in the 90s, the Colorado Buffaloes. I mean, they had some exciting moments. Was it Westbrook?
Oh, Westbrook, Ahmad Rashad, or Rashawn Salam. I'm an alum of the University of Colorado. We've fallen on hard times since, but those were the glory days, the salad days of Colorado Buff football.
Yeah, I mean, that was cool, right? I mean, the early 90s, you had some very exciting things in college football. I mean, you still do, but, I think you and I are about the same age. So, we're just reliving those glory days. All right. Fans Have More Friends. You can get it anywhere you can buy a book, I'm assuming, right?
True.
Barnes & Noble, Amazon, and so on and so forth. I'm assuming you'll have an audio version out, if not already, correct?
We will indeed, yes.
Okay, if you need a voice, I'm always available.
Okay.
Ben Valenta, dude, this is such a fantastic conversation. I was so excited to have you on. I love it. I love it. I love it. It's positive. It's positive. It's positive, and we're pushing it out into the world, and that's what it's all about. So good for you and David for doing this book. Fans Have More Friends. Thanks for your time, Ben.
Hey, thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Hey, you're a pro, man. Thanks. I'm sorry about the video stuff, dude. That's so on me, but you like it didn't bother you a bit. So that was awesome. Thank you.
All good. No, I appreciate the time. Thank you guys for the opportunity.
All right. Take care, Ben. Thank you.
Have a good day.
Bye bye.
All right, see ya.